Hello, and welcome to the program. This is the Black Ponderer. I'm the host of this YouTube channel. My name is Neil Trotter, and today we're going to be talking about some ancient Greek philosophy. And we're going back to the basics, to old school, and that's always fun to do. We're talking about Plato, and today we're going to be talking about his dialogue, the Phaedrus, not the symposium, but the Phaedrus. I want to say Phaedrus. That's what I want to say. On the internet, I hear most people calling it Phaedrus, so that's what I'm going to roll with. It might be one of those things where you can pronounce it either way. I don't know. It's kind of like that Nietzsche stuff. People get divided in that. But a lot of my German friends or friends who are from Germany who speak the native language are like, you can pronounce it Nietzsche or Nietzsche. It doesn't really matter to them. But anyway, so I'm gonna go with Phaedrus. And this is the Dover Thrift Edition. And Dover is popular for coming out with books on the cheap, I'm a huge fan of that. Accessibility, what it do, that's why they're together. That's why Symposium together. Symposium, I actually read that book. Didn't really get much out of that, to be completely honest with you, but the Phaedrus, I got a lot out of. So let's dive into it. So in this dialogue, a question arises. What is love? What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me. I love that song. That's like one of my all-time favorite songs. Let me stop playing. We were relaxed here at the Black Ponderer, but the Phaedrus asks, okay, what is love? What is the nature of love? And it goes deep into that. And Plato wrote about that a lot. Several of the ancient Greeks philosophers wrote about it. And so let's begin with the discussion of that, to answer that question by reading some quotes from the book. And that's what we do here at the Black Ponderer. We actually read the text. We actually read the text. And then we add supplementary commentary via what I'm saying here in the video and also down below in the comments section. Feel free. It's always open to chime in. So if you just so happen to have this edition, this is page 54. If you happen to have this edition, but this is the third paragraph here of that page, the second line. I'll just start reading. And this Socrates is talking here, because in Plato's dialogues, it's usually you got Socrates talking with other people, and in this particular dialogue is Phaedrus, a guy named Phaedrus. So Socrates says, now in what way is the lover to be distinguished from the non-lover? Let us note that in every one of us, there are two guiding and ruling principles, which lead us whither they will. One is the natural desire of pleasure. The other is an acquired opinion, which is in search of the best. And these two are sometimes in harmony and then again at war. And sometimes the one, sometimes the other conquers. When opinion conquers, and by the help of reason leads us to the best, the conquering principle is called temperance. But when desire, which is devoid of reason, rules in us and drags us to pleasure, that power of misrule is called excess. And so, that the whole idea of love, I guess, you can kind of think about like love versus lust, right? But, we're really talking about love, and not so much lust. There's love that is guided with reason, right? And then there's love that's just like kind of throws reason out the window. That kind of love, the head over heels love. We're not talking about lust here. We're just talking about head over heels style of love. Emotions override logic and reason. And what Socrates here is saying is, well, that's excess. But you can fall in love with somebody, you can be in love with somebody, and you can still be reasonable. Like, love doesn't throw out reason, right? And Socrates is saying that that's a good kind of love. So that's the first thing that we need to take into consideration when we're talking about love in the context of Plato. I put in my notes here in the margins, attraction to opinion differentiated by attraction of pleasure. Oh, okay, so that's an important thing, because Plato does use the word opinion here, at least that's what the translation uses. And so you formulate an opinion based off of reason. So when you think about opinion is subjective, right? And love is subjective, right? Not everybody falls in love with the same person, right? People fall in love with different people, and a lot of that has to do with biology, physiology, right? Psychology, the neural network of the mind, and the physiology of the body. But then also, once all that is happening, it's possible to put in some logic and some reasoning, throw that in there and be like, okay, should I really be following my passions to their fullest extent? Should I really divulge in this pleasure? Absolutely. What are the good things? What are the bad things? What's ethically involved? And through that pursuit, you can formulate an ethical, moral kind of love, right? And so that's what we're going to be kind of focusing on. So let me continue here. I skipped down 11 lines. The irrational desire, which overcomes the tendency of opinion towards right. Okay, the opinion towards right. What's that? That's morality. That's ethics. Ethics, morals, they're opinions toward right? Opinions dictated by reason and logic, and is led away to the enjoyment of beauty, and especially of personal beauty, by the desires which are her kindred. That desire, I say, the conqueror and the leader of the rest, and waxing strong from having this very power, is called the power of love. That's the power of love, that drive to override the opinion towards right, when you kind of are head over heels in love style. Again, I would like to reiterate that we're not necessarily talking about lust, although lust can be part of it, but you definitely can have the lust without the love. But we're talking about like, oh, I love this person, but it might not necessarily be moral or ethical or even like logical or a reasonable thing to do to pursue that love at the current time, right? But kind of that drive to just be like, well, the heck with it. If loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right, type of thing. That's the power of love. I think this is a good foundation we can work on as we continue to build up the ideas that are discussed in the Phaedrus. So here we go. This is page 59, and this is the fourth to the last line, and this is Socrates again talking. That was a lie in which I said that the beloved ought to accept the non-lover and reject the lover. This is like further into the discussion, because they're talking about how it's important to adopt that kind of reasoning. Like, it might not be the best thing to do to pursue this kind of love at this current time, right? Or resisting the power of love because you got things to do, right? And you might want to like hang around with people who you don't necessarily have that kind of passion for, but are driving you in the right direction. And they're going back and forth, Socrates and Phaedrus, in this dialogue about that. But then Socrates takes a step back and he's like, maybe that wasn't what I meant, right? Or what I should have said. So I'll continue here. Because the one is sane and the other mad. For that might have been truly said if madness were simply an evil. But there is also a madness which is the special gift of heaven and the source of the chiefest blessing among men, right? So what's being discussed here? The madness, which is that power of love, that like head over heels love that kind of gets in the way of logic. That can sometimes be a very good thing, right? So how so? I continue the text. For prophecy is a madness, and the prophetess at Delphi and the priestess of Dodona, when out of their senses, have confessed great benefits on Hellas, both in the public and private life, but when in their senses, few or none. And that's just an example, but there, think about prophets, are religious seers or sages, and a lot of that, mysticism or, religious drive, a lot of that is powered by this kind of madness, the way Socrates puts it. But again, it's that like override of logic to pursue like love. And we're starting to get outside just the love of just like sexual love, right? So, you know, romantic, even like romantic love, we're getting out even out of that, and we're just talking about more generally, like love as in like a righteous kind of passion. And sometimes that righteous passion can be good, even like a kind of illogical righteous passion. And I might also tell you how the Sibyl and other persons who have had the gift of prophecy have told the future of many and won and guided them aright. I'm skipping a line. There will be more reason in appealing to the ancient inventors of name, who, if they had thought madness a disgrace or dishonor, would never have called prophecy, which is the noblest of arts, by the very same name as madness, thus inseparably connecting them. But they must have thought that there was an inspired madness, which was no disgrace. So, you know, a head over heels love can be good. It just depends. Right? So that's very important when we're thinking about the nature of love and the way Plato is describing it. Plato isn't necessarily saying, look, you gotta always apply logic, always, all the time. Logic, reason, that's what should dictate love. He's saying, well, not necessarily. That's not what makes love good or bad. It's more of an opinion to do right, to do good. But Plato does say through Socrates that you should apply reason. But sometimes when you apply the reason, you might come to the conclusion that, okay, this is unreasonable, but it's still driving me to do good. So I'm going to do that. As opposed to sometimes you apply reason, it is like, okay, this is clearly like making me do wrong things, so I'm gonna back off. So the point is, unreasonable love can be good if driven to what's moral and right. So what is moral and what is right? How is that defined? All right, well, I will continue talking here by reading some more text. This is page 60. This is the last paragraph. I might tell of many other noble deeds which have sprung from inspired madness, and therefore let no one frighten or flutter us by saying that temperate love is preferable to mad love. That's not what it's about, what we just discussed. But let him further show, if he would carry off the palm, that love is not sent by the gods for any good to lover or beloved. And we, on our part, will prove in answer to him that the madness of love is the greatest of heaven's blessings. And the proof shall be one which the wise will receive, and the witling disbelieve. And first of all, let us inquire what is the truth about the affections and actions of the soul, divine as well as human. And thus we begin our proof. So now we're delving into like, okay, what's morality? How does morality relate to love? What is righteous love? And so Socrates is saying here, like, all right, let's look at the soul. The soul will tell us this. So Socrates continues. I'm going to jump to page 67. This is the last paragraph. I divide each soul into three parts. Okay, so Socrates is defining the structure of the soul. This is very fascinating. Two of them having the forms of horses, and the third that of a charioteer. Okay, so the soul is two horses pulled by a chariot with a charioteer. And one of the horses was good and the other bad. But I have not yet explained the virtue and vice of either. He hasn't explained that, virtue and vice, but he's gonna get to it. And to that I will now proceed. Okay. The well-conditioned horse is erect and well-formed. He has a lofty neck and aquiline nose, and his color is white. And he has dark eyes and is a lover of honor and modesty and temperance, and a follower of true glory. He needs not the touch of the whip, but is guided by word and admonition only, whereas the other is a large, misshapen animal, put together anyhow. He has a strong, short neck. He is flat-faced and of a dark color, gray-eyed and bloodshot, the mate of insolence and pride, shag-eared, deaf, hardly yielding to blow or spur. So, you know, the whole like white black trope, whatever. We're gonna like move past that and say like, you know, one of the horses is nice and loves honor and temperance. It is like well behaved, and the other one is rowdy and, you know, doesn't yield to commands and is very like temper tantrum. One would think like, you know, a bull in those like bull riding sports where it's just keeps bucking and bucking and bucking, while the other one is like just nice and trained and all that. So these are the two horses. Now, when the charioteer beholds the vision of love and has his whole soul warmed with sense and is full of tickling and desire, the obedient steed then, as always, under the government of shame, refrains himself from leaping on the beloved. But the other, instead of heeding the blows of the whip, prances away and gives all manner of trouble to his companion and to the charioteer, and urges them on toward the beloved and reminds them of the joys of love. And so that's how the soul operates, as Socrates describes. When the passions of love arise, the one horse is like, okay, let's not overreact here. Let's be temperate. You know, we got to be modest. You know, there's some shame in there, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't let on too thick. Where the other horse is like, hell, the heck with that, I'm going. Like full speed ahead to my lover and dear. So, you know, so one steed is just running rampant toward the love object, and the other is like, hold on a minute, let's be obedient here. And so the charioteer is trying to control this. They at first indignantly oppose him and will not be urged on to do terrible and unlawful deeds, but at last, when there is no end of evil, they yield and suffer themselves to be led on to do as he bids them. And now they are at the spot and behold the flashing beauty of the beloved. And so that's when the rowdy steed wins and the full force of the love desire is achieved. And this is what's happening in the soul. Let's continue with this construct of the soul here. This is page 69, and I'm gonna like start in the middle of the page here. Thus he loves, but he knows not what. He does not understand and cannot explain his own state. He appears to have caught the infection of another's eye. The lover is his mirror in which he is beholding himself, but he is not aware of this. When he is with the lover, both cease from their pain, but when he is away, then he longs as he is longed for, and has love's image, love for love, lodging in his breast, which he calls and deems not love, but friendship only. And his desire is as the desire of the other, but weaker. He wants to see him, touch him, kiss, embrace him, and not long afterwards his desire is accomplished. Now when they meet, the wanton steed of the lover has a word to say to the charioteer. He would like to have a little pleasure as a return for many pains, but the wanton steed of the beloved says not a word, for he is bursting with passion which he understands not. But he throws his arms around the lover and embraces him as his dearest friend. And when they are side by side, he is not in a state in which he can refuse the lover anything. If he asks him while his fellow steed and the charioteer oppose him with shame and reason. And so this is a way to think about when somebody just pursues their love interests and they don't know why do I like this person? Like, what draws me to this person? And you know, a lot of that just isn't happening. That kind of like thought process is not happening because it's that crazy ass steed like pushing the well-behaved steed and the charioteer toward the love interest. But let me continue with the text. After this, their happiness depends upon their self-control. If the better elements of the mind which lead to order and philosophy prevail, then they pass their life in this world in happiness and harmony, masters of themselves and orderly, enslaving the vicious and emancipating the virtuous elements. So the crazy, unyielding steed drives the person to their love interests. So now it's up to the other horse, the well-behaved horse, and the charioteer to be like, all right, get yourself in line, unyielding steed. Okay, we're gonna do this in a way that makes sense. You know, they apply the philosophy and the order, the reason. It's like, okay, you brought us here, but now we could begin to behave now. Or they could yield to the crazy ass steed and be like, no, we're just gonna keep going crazy, and we're not gonna think about like order and philosophy. We're just gonna keep pursuing the passion of love without any restraint. So Socrates is saying like, this is how love operates within people, right? And it's actually quite a useful metaphor to utilize if you really think about it. Let me continue. I skipped down 3 lines. If, on the other hand, they leave philosophy and lead the lower life of ambition, then probably in the dark or in some other ceaseless hour, the 2 wanton animals take the 2 souls when off their guard and bring them together. And they accomplish that desire of their hearts, which to the many is bliss. And this, having once enjoyed, they continue to enjoy, yet rarely, because they have not the approval of the whole soul. They too are dear, but not so dear to one another as the others. That's important to understand, right? If you control the steeds, right, and while you're in the passion of love, you can have a more fulfilling, a more sustainable kind of love. But the people who kind of go crazy and just let the unyielding steed take charge, I mean, they're having a good time too, but it doesn't last, right? And that's kind of interesting that Socrates says this in this dialogue. They too are dear, like they're lovers, but they're not as dear lovers as the ones who've got everything under control. But I'll continue here. Either at the time of their love or afterwards, they consider that they have given and taken from each other the most sacred pledges, and they may not break them and fall into enmity. At last they pass out of the body, unwinged, but eager to soar, and thus obtain no mean reward of love and madness. So, yeah, so what Socrates is saying here is when you just allow that crazy ass steed to take control, you're not going to get the true reward of love. It's just going to be this passing moment that ends, but it's not going to be lasting because you're not applying like reason or logic or like order or philosophy into the relationship. And ultimately you won't reap the true reward of love, which is, you know, as Plato is saying, this kind of transcendence, this kind of like using love to transcend oneself into like a greater kind of happiness, you know, rising above just passion and like actually like living in a reasonable, ethic way, using the passion of love as a driving force. You know, it's a driving force, but ultimately you're still in control. You know, the charioteer is still in control. I put in my notes here, philosophy must be utilized to reap the long-standing benefits of love. And here on page 78, Socrates says, you know, this is the bottom. As I said, love is a madness. There were 2 kinds of madness, one produced by human infirmity, the other by divine release of the ordinary ways of men. The divine madness was subdivided into 4 categories: prophetic, initiatory, poetic, and erotic. And I just mentioned that because Socrates said, look, it is a kind of madness because that steed is like not listening to reason, right? But the madness can be good or it could be bad. It could be divine or it could just be an infirmity, right? And then he goes on to divide it into these various classes, like prophetic, initiatory, poetic, erotic. And then he goes on to say like, look, the divine love can drive you into all types of really nice states of being, like prophetic, right? Or initiatory or poetic, right? A lot of poetic kind of rises above reason, but creates this kind of art form that's beautiful and reveals truth, right? And then the erotic, you know, of course, Socrates is not saying there's nothing wrong with the erotic if it's a kind of divine erotic, if it's an erotic that is within the realm of philosophy, right? But an erotic that's only passionate without anything else going for it is not lasting. And this is what Socrates is saying here. And then I skip all the way down to page 79. This is the last paragraph, Socrates again. I am a great lover of these processes of division and generalization. They help me speak and think. And you know, what I put on my notes here is the chair as a metaphor or an abstraction. And you know, I interpret that I am a great lover of these processes of division and generalization. Is he saying like, you know, I'm using this image to help us think about love and help us speak about love. You know, it is making sense of love. Like, is there an actual charioteer in the body? Are there horses actually within the soul that's guiding? Like, you know, that's not the point. The point is we're just using these methods of speaking, these concepts, these images, these metaphors to try and make sense of what's going on. And I think it's actually pretty useful. So now I want to go into like, okay, we got like moral, righteous love. You use it to create things like poetry or like, you know, righteous religious insight, right? Or even like cool versions of the erotic. You know, these kind of transcendent states of being, which are awesome. But also there's the other side of love, which is derogatory or destructive or not good, which is a fascinating way of thinking about it. Love, the power of love can drive one to do bad things. Right? And how so? How so? Well, let's read page 84. And this is the last paragraph. Socrates again is talking. Oratory is the art of enchanting the soul, and therefore he who would be an orator has to learn the differences of human souls. They are so many and of such a nature, and from them come the differences between man and man. He will then proceed to divide speeches into their different classes. Such and such persons, he will say, are affected by this or that kind of speech in this or that way. And he will tell you why. He must have a theoretical notion of them first. And then he must see them in action and be able to follow them with all his senses about him, or he will never get beyond the percepts of his masters. But when he is able to say what persons are persuaded by what arguments, and recognize the individual about whom he used to theorize as actually present to him, and say to himself, this is he, and this is the sort of man who ought to have the argument applied to him in order to convince him of this. When he has attained the knowledge of all this, and knows also when he should speak and when he should abstain from speaking, and when he should make use of pithy sayings, pathetic appeals, aggravated effects, and all the other figures of speech, when, I say, he knows the times and seasons of all these things, then, and not till then, he is perfect and a consummate master of his art. Okay, and I put in my notes here, those skilled in oratory command the charioteers of others. The lovers subordinate their charioteers to the skilled orator. And we're talking about like manipulation, you know, manipulative people. People who use their skill in oratory, their charisma, to manipulate, to hijack the souls of people, like to go into their souls and command the charioteer. Like they go and they say, look, the person driving the chariot, like, okay, you're gonna allow that unyielding steed to go unhinged. Make sure that other horse that's like trying to obey order and philosophy, don't listen to that horse. Let that steed just run rampant, all right, and just wild and free. And you yield to what I'm saying, right? So they, you know, people who are skilled in oratory know how to do that. And sometimes that can be good, but oftentimes that's bad, right? We discussed this before in my video about Plato's dialogue Gorgias, right? Where, you know, he attacks oratory as this kind of thing that's obsessed with persuasion and not so much preoccupied with doing the right thing or making the moral or ethical choice. It's just about persuading people, right? And I would say like maybe this is a continuation the Phaedrus is a continuation of that. Like, okay, how does oratory do that? Well, you can use that metaphor of the soul and say like, well, orators will come in, they'll hijack the charioteer of other people's souls, and they'll command the charioteers to keep that nice, well-behaved, orderly horse in check. You know, the horse that is about order and philosophy. You know, that horse is commanded to not do anything, while the crazy, passionate, unyielding steed is just allowed to run rampant and wild and free and pull the chariots of all these people toward the orator. And I think that's a really good way of symbolizing what's going on, because it's like it shows like kind of a separation of like, well, is the charioteer the person that the soul belongs to? You know, the person that the soul occupies? No, the charioteer is just a part of the soul, and which can be taken and forced to follow the orders of somebody else. And that's how souls or people can be dominated or manipulated, or like, you know, emotionally, mentally manipulated and controlled. So if somebody falls head over heels in love with a manipulator or a narcissist or an abuser, right? Or, you know, a scumbag or a scam artist or a con artist, or, you know, fill in the blank with your negative exploitative word, this is how it's happening. This is page 90. This is the 4th paragraph. I'm just highlighting what Socrates is saying here. Until a man knows the truth of the several particulars of which he is writing or speaking, and is able to define them as they are, and having defined them again, to divide them until they can be no longer divided, and until in like manner he is able to discern the nature of the soul and discover the different modes of discourse which are adapted to different natures, and to arrange and dispose them in such a way that the simple form of speech may be addressed to the simpler nature, and the complex and composite and to the complex nature. Until he has accomplished all this, he will be unable to handle arguments according to rules of art, as far as their nature allows them to be subjected to art, either for the purpose of teaching or persuading. Notice there's the difference, either teaching or persuading. So one is moral and ethical, one not so. That is the view which is implied in the whole preceding argument. So oratory in the service of truth is good and righteous. Again, we kind of fall back to what was said in Gorgias. I think I'm saying that right. I made a video about that dialogue too, where you love somebody and you're using your love to teach somebody, to, you know, help somebody progress in life, to enable somebody. That's good. That's righteous. But when your love is just based on persuasion and just making sure that person falls in line with you, and that's all you care about, that's bad. And then Socrates says here, a line down, as to the justice of the censor, which was passed on speaking or writing discourses. Any other writer that ever was or will be, whether private man or statesman, writes a political treatise in his capacity of legislator and fancies that there is a great certainty and clearness in his performance. Now we're getting into politics, because Plato, he brings up the politics, and that's important because this is what's going on with politicians and how they are able to use persuasive arts like oratory to manipulate or get people to fall in love with them, but in an immoral way. For entire ignorance about the nature of justice and injustice and good and evil, and the inability to distinguish the dream from the reality, cannot in truth be otherwise than disgraceful to him, even though he have the applause of the whole world. Right? So if the person can't distinguish between the dream and reality, you know, if they can't distinguish between justice and injustice, even though the whole world loves them or they got a lot of love, right, they are in the wrong. Right? So that in this way, that's how love can be used, or love can result in negative, immoral things. When you're in love with somebody, but that love can't distinguish between truth and fiction, reality from the dream, justice versus injustice, if that love is unable to make those determinations, again, which that well-behaved steed can do, right? But the crazy-ass steed doesn't do. The crazy-ass steed just follows the passions, but the well-behaved steed can be like, okay, wait a minute. Is justice in here? Is there truth here? Is this a reality going on here? Or is this just some false dream world state or something where like people are not seeing justice for what it is? I'll skip down the line here. He who thinks that in the written word there is necessarily much which is not serious, and that neither poetry nor prose, spoken or written, are of any great value, if, like the compositions of the rhapsodes, they are only recited in order to be believed, and not with any view to criticism or instruction. I'll repeat that, that's important. They are only recited in order to be believed, right? And not with any view to criticism or instruction. If that's not going on, if I just believe you, but there's no critique, and there's no like learning process, no education, like, those are red flags. Like, what kind of love is that? It's an immoral kind of love, right? That's what Socrates is saying. And who thinks that even the best of them are but a reminiscence of what we know, and that only in principles of justice and goodness and nobility taught and communicated orally and written in the soul, which is the true way of writing, is there clearness and perfection and seriousness, and that such principles are like legitimate offspring? So I put in my notes here. Oratory focused only on persuasion without truth is bad and unrighteous, but a lot of love is based off of that kind of thing. And so in this way, love can drive people to immorality and unrighteousness. It's an important distinction to make. It's not so much about, well, you gotta be reasonable. You have to be reasonable, right? You gotta use logic here, and and it's not this idea that head over heels love is bad. That's not necessarily true, right? Head over heels illogical love can be good, but without a determination of what's righteous and unrighteous, without a determination of what is just and unjust, a determination of real and unreal, because there's many aspects of life, for instance, that are illogical. We live in oftentimes life can be illogical, but that doesn't mean that that's not real. But sometimes you can push a false logic or a false reason, right? And you can base your whole reality off that false you can create this reason that has no bearing on reality, right? Whereas sometimes you have to accept, like, okay, I just don't, this is just something I'm just not going to be able to understand, right? There's a lot of aspects of life that are like that. And love can help you get through those episodes, right? So it's not just about reason, but it's using reason and philosophy to make sensible conclusions, which are quite hard to do sometimes in like really tumultuous situations. But love can help. That passion of love can drive you through that crazy ass bull can really push you to go through those tumultuous episodes. But you always gotta have the behaved steed making sure, okay, is this truthful? Is this just? Is there a kind of order here? All right, let's keep going, a crazy ass steed. That's what's going on here. But let me continue with the text here. Being in the first place that which the man finds in his own bosom. Secondly, the brethren and descendants and relations of this, which has been duly implanted in the souls of others, and who cares for them and no others. This is the right sort of man. And you and I, Phaedrus, would pray that we may become like him. And then I put in my notes here, implanted in others because they are in control or in command of others' charioteers. Right? It's possible. You can hijack somebody's soul, and this is metaphorical, right? You're hijacking one's love. You're the one that's commanding the chariots of other people's souls and driving them to do as you see fit because they're following the passions of their love towards you. Honestly, it's a pretty amazing way of thinking about love and how love can be a manipulative, exploitative, abusive force if not applied philosophically. And again, that's why I always say, the Black Ponderer is a strong proponent of philosophy. It's very important. Yeah. So I would encourage you to think about people you loved ones, whether it's like, romantic loved or, just people, friends that you deeply care about, or, maybe even public figures or celebrities or people in the limelight. Politicians, for instance. We're getting close to that election, aren't we? Big ass election here in the United States. When you think about that, you're like, oh, I love this person. Well, what is that love based off of? And is that person manipulating your passions? Is that person interested in actually teaching you and instructing you and, interested in justice, right? Or righteousness? Or is that person interested only in persuading you to do their bidding? Or they just want a fan base or somebody they can leech off of and control and manipulate because maybe they're a narcissist or egotistical or self-obsessed or something like that, right? These are things you have to really think about, right? And it all comes down to like, okay, is my love for this person making me better? Is it helping me create a better world? Like, is it helping me help others? Is my love for this person creating positiveness? Is this love for this person enabling me to construct a better world? To be a positive force in society and for myself, right? Is that what's happening? Is this, because that's a righteous kind of love, right? Otherwise, if it's causing you to do destructive things, if it's like enabling you to destroy, to be more negative, right? To either to yourself or to others, right? Then you really have to sit down and evaluate, okay, what kind of love really is this, right? Is this a love that's like actually good? Because, according to the Phaedrus, there's love that's bad. Which is, not all love is good, right? It's quite a thing to think about, isn't it? I would encourage you to check it out. This is just the Dover Thrift Editions. It's definitely free on the internet. Or, I'm sure that you can go to a local library. It's super old. It's ancient, right? Ancient Greek philosophy, baby. Anyway, you've been watching The Black Ponderer. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought.